What does it take to be a great leader? Is it something that you are born with or something that you learn along the way? Our guest today is the managing director of White and Case Global Operations Manila LLC, Carlo Mata. Hi, Carlo. Thank you for
Hi,
accepting the
Sheila.
invitation. Yes,
Oh, my
hi.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. I love your background. It's already Christmas right
I
where
know
you are.
it is. It's an early Christmas. We got the
Yeah.
tree up just last week.
So did you do it with the kids?
No, my wife and the kids did it. They were really excited. They've been asking for the tree to come up. They were the ones who decorated the tree and all the Christmas decors around the house.
Wow,
Yeah.
I love that. That's a really awesome. So, I will not, without further ado, I want to ask a question. How do you define leadership?
I normally always default to the definition of um, John Maxwell, one of the biggest, I think, leadership gurus of our time, and he
Yeah.
defines it as leadership is influence. It's not a position. A lot of people think of leadership as a position. Like when I reach a level of position or a title of leadership, then well, that can be true as well. Um, I would define it as the ability to influence results and the ability to influence people. I think that's what leadership is.
Yes, that's really awesome. Do you think leadership is a skill set or a gift that you're born with?
I think it's both. I think it's I think there are natural traits that help one become a more effective leader. However, I don't think um, I don't think there is any one profile for leadership. So in other words, some people say, "Oh, if you're an extrovert, you're going to be a good leader. You cannot
Mm-hmm.
be a leader if you're an introvert." I don't think that's true. One of the things that if your audience or if you're not familiar with, or you may be familiar with Clifton Strengths, um, Clifton Strengths, if you Google it, talks about sort of the gifts and strengths and talents of individuals, where it categorizes all of it into 34 general themes. And when we talk about these 34 strengths or themes, it talks about, say, different talents of people, but you can use different talents to achieve the same outcome. So if the outcome you're trying to go for example, is leadership and influence or strategic thinking, you can use a multitude of different strengths to get to the same outcome that you're trying to get to. However, when we talk about gifts and strengths and talents, a lot of these things are innate. These are things that you are naturally good at as compared to other people. But if you do not develop it, then it
Mm.
never really becomes a full uh, uh, an effective gift or talent. So you cannot just simply rely on your natural skills and talents and wing it. You always have to find a way to develop it. It's like raw material, right? So it's like
Mm.
say a block of iron or steel. Um, it's raw material. If you can choose to develop it to become, say, from a raw material, you create a horseshoe, or you can make it into other
Mm.
materials depending on the purpose that you want for it to
Mm.
accomplish. But at the end of the day, it is both a raw material, it is a raw gift. But if
Mhm.
you don't harness and develop it, then it never really it never is able to impact people the way it should.
Mm. So
Did
I'm
that
kind of
answer
like,
the question?
yes, I can understand what you're saying, but it gives me a vision of a muscle that
Yeah,
you need to lift weights. So
that's right.
and also,
That's a
yeah,
perfect example.
and do you think also that as a leader, you know, if you said that was a brilliant answer. I love it. When you said that it's both a skill and it's and a gift. Do you think also that as a leader, you also have to choose the books that you're going to read or the materials? If you are, for example, going to the gym and building your muscles, you need
Hmm.
to choose the food that you eat. It has to be healthy food. So, do you think that things that I need to watch feed my soul? Do you think it has an effect to that? What's your?
Absolutely. I
Mm-hmm,
think garbage in, garbage out, right? I think one of the things and everyone is a leader. Believe it or not, I know people think of it as, oh, I'm not a leader. No, if you have the ability to influence people, even your family, then you are a leader in a capacity, one way, shape, or form.
mm,
And so the way things are developed, the way skills and talents and gifts such as leadership is developed is always in relation to a relationship. It's always in relation to people. So it doesn't
wow.
develop on its own. It will only develop in relation to people within the framework of a mission, right? And so, or a
Brilliant.
purpose. And so, if you are um, if you are someone who wants to develop that gift, that talent, you cannot do it on your own. Um, you talked about, for example, books. Books are one of the best ways to learn and to grow and be a mentor and be mentored by someone who might not even know you personally,
Mm,
or you might not even know. But books are a great way because you're able to you're able to take a piece of the mind of the author and their experience and share that. And for me, I started off with a diet of when I was younger. My dad was always into books. Like my mom would always criticize him because he didn't have a huge salary, right? He was a minister, he was a pastor, and it's almost like he would spend the last amount of money on books. And I remember one time he came home with a huge with huge plastic bags of books, and my mom said, "Well, are you gonna cook those books? Because we don't have food." And it didn't bother my dad at all. He was like, "Well, it's food for thought," and that didn't
mm,
make my mom happy. But he started out with, I remember at a young age, I got exposed to books by Norman Vincent Peale, Dale
mhm.
Carnegie, how to influence how to win friends and influence people, Dale Carnegie, and then John Maxwell, developing the leaders, develop the 21 laws of leadership and all these things. So
Yeah.
I started reading that. And then, interestingly enough, Sheila, as I started growing in my corporate life, I found out there were a lot of people who had a totally different, I would call it, school of thought from leadership. So they found John Maxwell's uh, thought leadership as very um, cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my former boss called it. He said, "You know what John Maxwell leadership thought is like?" He said, "It's like a bucket of caramel sprinkled with sugar, and you can only have too much of it before you
Yeah.
gag." And I said,
Mm,
"Really?" And so I started reading other leadership books, and I would say this: just like food, it's good to have a favorite, it's good to have a staple, but it's also nice to be able to understand what shapes the mind and thinking and leadership thought of the people you deal with, because it's not about you, it's about your ability to relate with people. And so
awesome.
I find out oftentimes when I would deal with someone, when I would um, have a relationship with someone, a working relationship, I would ask exactly the same questions you're asking. What
Mm-hmm.
shapes your leadership thought? Who influences your leadership belief? What
Mm-hmm.
books do you read? That way I understand where the person is coming from and I find a way to relate with that person. I think oftentimes we're guilty of just sticking to one thing. And if, for example, if this is what I believe, then the only thing I'm going to read are things that are very consistent with this. And what we end
Mm,
up having is a bias towards something. But the truth is, sometimes one of the most important things we can do is read the thoughts of people we don't agree with so that we can
mm,
understand where they're coming from and relate with them better.
mm. When you were a kid, growing up as a kid, did you see signs of leadership in you? Like when you're playing, or you're in
I did.
school?
I did. You know, I was
Yeah.
one of the biggest troublemakers in school. I'm not proud of it.
Mm,
When I was young, I remember the most common thing teachers would tell me, anak ka pa naman, anong pastor? And in for those who don't understand my local dialect, they're basically saying, we can't believe you act that way. You're a son of a pastor, right? And I remember when I was young, I would always use that influence to get other kids into trouble, even nice kids, right? And we we would have sort of grade two, grade three. We would have these fights in the football field. We would have these riots, and I realized when I was in the disciplinarian's office, I remember the prefect of discipline at that time was a anointed man named Pastor Dino Mishano. And
mm,
Pastor Dino Mishano pulled me aside and said, you clearly have the ability to influence. And he said this because he interviewed all these students who were all being detained and suspended. And he asked them, why did you fight? What got you into this fight? And they all pointed to me and said, we actually didn't want to fight. But Carlo influenced us to fight. And Pastor Dino Mishano pulled me aside and said, you clearly have the ability to influence people and outcome. But you need to find a way to use that towards something that is constructive. He said, because otherwise you lead your life into trouble and lead other people into trouble. And little by little, I found out, oh man, I have the ability to influence people. And thank God for His grace and mercy in my life, without which I don't know where I would be today.
mm,
But the Lord somehow allowed me to discover that to use it to influence people for something that is constructive, for something that helps people develop people, build people up. Uh, but yes, even if you're watching this, if you're in this stream right now, listening, some of you may be able to relate to this. You have the ability to influence, for example, positivity, positive thinking. Some might even be negativity, right? You might think of it as you stir the pot, you always create this trouble. And after you say something, all of a sudden you realize a lot of people start thinking negative about a situation as well or a person.
mm.
That is actually leadership, except that
Yeah.
it's being used and targeted towards something that does not build up, but something that creates trouble. But that, if you can recognize it, is actually leadership. Your ability to influence people,
Mm.
behavior, emotions, and outcome.
Wow, that was brilliant. I love that. Who has been your role model on leadership?
I'd say my biggest role model has always been my dad.
Somehow
He's
I knew that this answer is going to be dad.
no, you know what? It's funny when I was younger. When I was younger, my mom and dad didn't know the stuff I was doing. I was a rebel. I was really a rebel. Um, they didn't know the stuff I was doing, but my dad would always tell me, son. Here's the other thing. If you're listening to this, if you're a father or a mother, your ability to influence your children is massive. If you're a stay-at-home mom and you're thinking, when people ask you, what do you do? And I know some stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads even who always use the word just right before they describe what they do, and they say, well,
Mm,
I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or I'm just a stay-at-home dad. Let me tell you this: you are the biggest influence to your children's perspective, children's life and outcome, and outlook towards life. In essence, what you are is you are the influencer of the next generation. And
mm,
For me, my dad always influenced me, would always say, I remember as a small kid, he and I would be driving around and I'd be so small and he'd say, son, you're you're going to be an influencer one of these days. You're going to be a leader one of these days. And people will listen to your to the words and the advice that you will have to give. And I was about 7 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, and I would hear that. But believe it or not, it shaped unknowingly, even if I didn't want to, it shaped my outlook in life. And so he was a leader in my life. He influenced me. And so if
Mm,
you're listening to this, if you're listening to this broadcast, I want you to know you have the ability to influence the future. You have the ability to influence the future one life at a time.
amazing.
And so for me, that biggest influence, Sheila, was my dad. He
Yes.
influenced me, and man of integrity. He wasn't a perfect man, okay.
Uh-huh.
I gotta say, I mean, my mom and dad would always argue because he would always be late for things. So um, my mom would be waiting in the car. My dad would find something to do last minute before we leave the house. And that always irked my mom. But he wasn't the perfect man. None of us are perfect. But
Uh-huh.
it showed me one of the biggest things is integrity is one of the biggest things you can have as a
As
leader,
yes.
and that's something I
Amazing.
really.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I can relate to what you're saying that everybody is a leader. Uh, the first time I was sitting in an office, I was still working at the time. I was sitting in an office and I was given a position of a manager. I was sitting there. I was 25 or something. I the first thing that I said to myself is, how can I lead these people? I don't know anything. You don't know that feeling of inadequacy inside
Oh
you.
yeah,
And I was holding that 21, that John Maxwell book that says 21.
21
Uh,
laws of leadership.
yes, that one. And even the capacity to understand the book, I didn't have that yet.
Yeah,
um like at that time my life was in turmoil and I was given a position I did not even think I was worthy or I could do, but I needed it. It was something that
yeah,
I needed to do for my own children.
yeah.
And the thing is, you're talking right now and I can relate to that. I want to ask you, what does love got to do with great leadership?
Oh, you cannot lead without loving.
Fantastic.
Um, I think without loving, your leadership will be very selfish. Your leadership will
Mhm.
be self-serving, and we have a lot of that. We have a lot of leaders who are self-serving leaders, and for me, it's been a journey. By the way, Sheila, what you talked about, where you feel you're not worthy, that's called imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
If you're listening to that, that's called imposter syndrome, and we all go through that. We all walk into a situation where we're thinking, "Oh my goodness, what am I doing in this position? What am I doing in this room with all these brilliant people? I'm just pretending. I hope no one realizes no one
Yes.
uncovers the truth behind this, that I actually don't think I belong here." And if that's you, believe me, you're not alone. Okay, and
Yeah, that's
we
good to
can
know.
use yeah, and that's actually better than always thinking you know everything and that you have nothing else to learn. But the what was the question again, Sheila?
Love, love
Love,
leadership.
love. Um, I remember our chairman, one of the best leaders I've served under, came to Manila and he did this town hall, which we call the fireside chat. And he was asked by someone who really looked up to him and said, "I am just a rank and file person. Can I ever be a leader? Can I ever be a leader like you?" And our chairman turned around and asked her a question and said, "Do you care for people?" She said, "Yes." Then you have the biggest element required to lead, the ability to care. Because if you don't care for people, then some people influence, but they influence towards evil outcome. Uh, but when you care for people, you you realize the reason why you lead. Because you cannot develop leadership in a vacuum away from people. Um, if you do, it becomes a distorted form of leadership. Leadership is always developed within the context of the people you lead. And
Mm,
so to lead, you need to care for the people you lead. If you're a mom or a dad, you cannot lead your children and not care for your children.
yeah.
You're not a parent, you're not a leader, you are just a caretaker, you know. And so for you to be an effective leader, you've got to love. Uh, I there's a book by Brian Houston. I believe it was entitled "Live, Love, Lead," and he puts lead as the last thing because for you to lead effectively and to the maximum potential, you've got to love the people you lead, and that does not mean you always agree and they agree with you. You can always be in a position where there are things that you don't always agree with. Like between my
Mm,
wife and I, it's funny. We disagree about the color of the curtain or the size of the window, or little things that we disagree with. But you cannot. You have to major on the majors and not on the minors. Make the main thing the main thing. Um, and there will be disagreements, but at the end of the day, you've got to love the people you lead. You've got to have a heart for the people you lead. Otherwise, it's going
awesome.
to be a toxic leadership.
Yeah, good point. Is there such is there such a thing as caring too much? Because in my own experience, this is something that I had to learn the hard way, Carlo. I care too much. Like for example, I have this girls. I have Wonder Woman Academy, and it's both online and also live. In real life, where I interact with them, and sometimes when I know that they're going to step into a very painful situation, like for example, um g- coming into a relationship or going into a relationship that is going to hurt them real bad, I tend to be very, very protective. And
Mhm.
then it could be misunderstood. And I have been misunderstood a lot by the way that I care. And so I have to mellow it down along the way because, I have to, what do you call it, look at Jesus in
Mhm.
that aspect. I care, but then there's the free will.
Mhm.
So I kind
Is
of
there such
like,
a thing as caring too much?
yes,
That's your
is there?
question.
Hmm.
Um, maybe there might be there might be. I don't know, but I don't think the issue there is care. I think
Is control?
l- I think control. I think the issue there is control. And
Hmm.
when you love, you need to understand the boundaries of
Great point.
of your influence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even for leadership, for me, the way I lead is I'm not. Uh, when I was younger, as a younger leader, I was a little bit more prescriptive and dictatorial. And as I continue to mature in my leadership, I realize sometimes it's about asking people questions, the people you lead questions, and going through the thought process together. And sometimes the outcome is not the same as yours. The answer they come up with is not exactly the same as yours. And
Awesome.
guess
Yes.
what? As a leader, it's not about people arriving at the same outcome and thought as you, but
Mm-hmm.
it's about understanding the diversity of outcome, the diversity of skills, the diversity of talents, the diversity of gifts, and the diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And even here at home I have three daughters, and they all are very different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
For my wife and I, when we have family conversations and family meetings, one of the things that we instill in them is the respect of different opinions. And the three sisters will have sometimes different opinions on what they want. And we
Yeah.
teach them at a young age, for example, what do you guys want to eat? Obviously, they'll say, well, I want this, and I want that. All three are very different. And little things like that, we teach them, okay, well, why don't you guys talk about which one you will order today? Can we just order all? Well,
Mhm.
technically we can, but then it doesn't teach them any lesson, right? So we tell
Yeah.
them we can, but guess what? Out of the three, we'll just order two. How about for now, you guys agree on which two we will order, but understand next time you're gonna have to give way to the other one.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so for us as leaders, we need to understand that the people we lead will not always be in agreement with us, and we will not always be in agreement with them, and that is perfectly okay. It doesn't
I
feel
love that.
okay. It's frustrating and it gnaws at you, and you're thinking, why didn't they come up with the same answer as I did? Like, it's so clear. I was showing them, I told them all my reasons, but how come they did not end up in the same thought decision
Yeah.
as I did? That's because
Mm.
you are two different individuals. And
Mm-hmm.
imagine if you were talking to you all the time, and it would be a boring world, right? I mean, if everyone
Yes.
was like you and everyone arrived at the same thought as you, and it's going to be a very monotonous world. And so
Yeah.
it's not, the issue is not care. The issue is not care. The issue is control. And when you
Mm-hmm.
love, you understand that at some point you cannot control everything. You can
Mm-hmm.
influence, but you cannot control.
Mm.
Um,
That's amazing.
so you have to understand the difference. You will share your heart with your friend, but they have to know that whatever decision they make, you love them. You love them no matter what.
I love that.
You
Yes.
may not always agree with them, and you cannot always assure them that I'm behind you all the way. At some point, you can say, you know what? I love you. I cannot support your decision. The decision I don't support, but you as a person, I love. And
Mm-hmm.
because I love you, you have my respect, even if I disagree with your
Mm-hmm.
decision.
Mm-hmm. For me, like my learning curve for this, this is a big thing for me. I didn't know that it was control or something. But for me, I realized that at some point when you are leading, even if you know that they're gonna make, it's gonna be a mistake, you're almost 99.9% is gonna be a mistake. This, for example, in relations, this is not the man that God has for you. I'm perfectly sure. And you know, allowing them to make the mistake was what I said
Yeah.
to myself, you know.
Also, you're
And
not the Holy Spirit, right? So
yeah.
you have to allow the Holy Spirit to speak to them too.
Yes.
Uh,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
man's words are man's words, right? But when
Mm-hmm.
the Holy Spirit speaks to them, it speaks to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, they will be accountable for their own decisions. But let them know this: at the end of, if you are really a loving friend,
Mm-hmm.
when you are proven right, you don't rub it in their face. You don't even say, I told you so. It's just, they need to know as a friend, if and when they do realize the mistake, you're there for them to support them.
Mm-hmm.
You're there to encourage them. You're there. Uh, Obviously, it's
Yes.
different when it's a habitual thing. It's no longer a mistake, right? Meaning it's
Mm.
already, they keep coming back to the same mistake. Then obviously, as a friend, you sternly warn them and you tell them, look, you keep coming back to this same type of guy. If you're always going, if you're always looking for a relationship, and the place you go to shop for a relationship is a bar at 2 a.m. with drunken men, you're gonna
Yeah.
come home with the wrong choice every single time. Um, but at the end of the day, if they want to make that decision, it's tough. You just gotta pray for them, right?
Yes.
You gotta pray for them, and let the
Mhm.
Lord make work on their heart and their decision. And
Great
believe
point.
me, sometimes when you pray for them, instead of the
Mhm.
Lord working on them, the Lord starts to work on yours.
I know that. That's an experience I have. A lot has changed since then. It's like I said, it's the application of leadership and relating towards other people, the people that you care about, is when you actually learn in becoming a great leader, because you don't just come out and become instant great leader. You come out as a
Yeah.
leader. Uh, you have the skill set, and then along the way, as you practice, you get that. Do you think leading the millennials and the Gen Z is a lot different from traditional way, from
I
our
think
way?
there. I look. I did my very first public talk.
Mm,
I My topic was leading millennials, and um, the conclusion of my talk, uh, I had three major points, and the three things I talked about was how to effectively lead them.
mm,
At the end, my final conclusion was this: there are more things we have in common than we do have differences.
mm,
And when you lead people, it's not just about generations, even individuals of the same generation. Let's talk about even your batchmates in school. You will have disagreements. And it's not a
mm,
generational thing, it's an individual thing. And
mm,
so it's important for us as leaders that um, we do not stereotype people, including generations, and say, oh, the Gen Zers, or by the way, it's not even millennials. Millennials are old now. We're old. Um, the Gen Zers are, believe it or not, the I forgot what you call the generation after Z. I think it's Alpha. They call it the Alpha
are
generation.
you serious?
Yeah, they're about to, in a few years they will be entering the workforce. It's not even the
Wow.
Gen Z anymore. The Gen Z are in the workforce. Millennials are in leadership, and it's the Alpha generation now who will be entering the workforce soon. And
Mm,
so one thing that you can say is, well, they are accustomed to, what are they accustomed to?
mm,
But that's not to say that leading them is different. Of course, you adjust. So one of the things I do, for example, in the office is, what's the biggest app now around the world? I think it's TikTok, right?
TikTok, yes.
TikTok is like 60 seconds of maximum, 60 seconds of content,
Yes.
if not even
Mm,
less. So people now are used to quick content. And so
mm,
for us, the challenge for us as leaders is, when we engage our people in a message, we have to do it in bursts of um, content. Why? Because they're able
experience.
to pick it up. So
Uh-huh.
they're faster in that sense. In that sense as well, they have less attention span for
Mm,
the typical long email. So if you're still emailing, it's a long email
yes.
and all that. There's a place and time for that, but we need to learn how to make use of the advantages. I would say this: the Gen Z, the millennials, and even the Alpha, their generation has advantages and strengths that
Mm,
we all need, right?
mm,
We need these things. And so when you learn to respect the diversity of each group and what they bring to the table, then you can learn to capitalize on the strength and add that into the team. And when you look at the strengths of each generation or each individual and each team member, you're able to play to the strengths and get the most out of the team composition. So it's not about leading them differently, it's about understanding what are they strong at, and then saying, okay, let's use your strength to further the mission.
mhm. I love your adaptability. That was quite refreshing. So this is totally out of the question. Like, I'm just gonna ask, like, totally out of it. Your wood crafts. I have seen, like, I was scrolling through your, because you told me that I could just grab a
Yeah,
photo for my
yeah,
poster. Like, I was like, oh my god, he has the tools.
I
These tools
do.
are
Very
like,
expensive tools.
I know, right? And I was like, oh, what do you call this? And this is my workstation here. Sometimes it
Yeah,
turns into sewing thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah. Crafts.
crafts, like, and this, I, on Instagram I follow these people who are amazing with wood, and then they
Yeah.
have all these tools.
Yeah.
And I think I have seen some of the things that you have done, which is really, how do you feel when you're doing that thing? Like, this is
Oh my
your kind
goodness.
of like, yes,
Therapeutic. It's therapeutic to
yeah.
me. First of all, I I have good, nice, expensive tools, but my skills don't match my tools. I'm naturally a handyman. That I picked up from my dad. I if there's something that needs to be fixed at home, we don't call someone. I fix it, right? My dad would always. I remember my mom growing up. What you'd always hear at home is, "Oh, this thing needs to be fixed. It's broken." And the common response you'd always hear at home growing up was, "Well, you have two sons. Tell them to fix it."
Mm,
And so we had to figure out a way to fix something. And so we don't. Our natural inclination is not to call for help, or hire someone to fix it. Our natural inclination is to understand it, to study it, and then to fix it. So in that sense, I was pretty good at DIY stuff. But then woodworking became a hobby because, like you, when I look at these Instagram accounts and I look at what they create, you can't help but admire from the raw material of wood to the finished product. And I'll tell you this. I'll relate that to leading yourself and leading people, right? Leading yourself, leading people. You need to understand every single person has a gift and a talent. Some of you who are listening to this might be saying, "Well, I don't have any gifts, I don't have any talents." That's not true. That's a lie. You have a
mm,
gift, you have a talent, right? Every single person has a gift and a talent. But that gift and talent is a natural resource like wood. And
mm,
you've got to find a way to take that natural resource and make it go through a process of refinement, a process of building up, a process of cutting, a process of shaping, a process of finishing, a process of sanding, a process of, but the end product becomes something very beautiful and useful. And so, if you want to develop to being the best that you can be, you've got to be able to submit yourself in your rawness, in your raw material form, and go through a process of refinement. I love woodworking because that's what it is. You buy this wood. I bought this old, beaten up wood that I saw on Facebook. The person posted it, found it along a river in Isabela province. And it was an old beaten yakal piece of wood. And yakal
mm,
is a local wood that is considered a hardwood. It's a kind of wood that termites cannot destroy. Um, and so I messaged the person. I said, "Are you selling this? How much are you selling it?" He said, "I'm selling it for 5,000 pesos, but I'm all the way from Isabela. You're all the way from Parañaque, Metro Manila." We found a way to have Victory Liner bring it
mm.
to
Ship it to, yes.
Metro Manila. I picked it up in the bus station. I look at it and I think, what can I do with this thing? I'll be lying if I said I've created a beautiful product out of it. It's been still sitting in my garage till now. But I've taken other different pieces of wood. I've made cabinetry. I've made all these things, and it's
Mm,
beautiful. It's You ask me how do I feel about it? I find it very therapeutic. I listen to a podcast. So the one thing I do, I always multitask. I saw your message earlier. You said you multitask a lot. I
mm.
multitask. I always listen to audiobooks. So if
That's
you're
nice.
listening and you say, "But I don't have time to sit down and just read a book," well, maybe you have time to cook and listen to an audiobook. Or
Mm,
maybe while you're working out on a treadmill, you can listen to an audiobook. For me, while I'm doing my arts and woodcraft, the machines are noisy, so I put on earphones anyway. So what I did is I put
yeah.
on Bluetooth earphones and I put on an audiobook, and I work at the same time. I feed my mind and my spirit. So
Mm.
I find the two things when they come together very therapeutic.
Honest. It's the same thing with me. Like, for example, if I'm only listening, I would fall asleep a little bit later. But when my
Yeah.
hands are busy and then I'm listening to something, then I am in tune with everything. I flow with it. But if I'm
Yes.
just doing
Yes. I'm like that.
one Yes. And then, so that's why I told you I was doing the question for 5 minutes because I was in the middle of my sewing stuff, you know. And
Yeah.
so when I create something, this is our heavenly Father's nature. This is totally out of but I just love to share this with you. The creativity of our Father is flowing through us, and I think when you nurture this creativity in you, this actually um, releases because it's therapeutic. So
Yeah.
the mind is relaxed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're not prone. Our minds does not stop thinking. But then
Yeah.
when you are in this zone of creating something, you are actually imitating our heavenly Father into creating
Yeah.
something. Do you know when I'm doing this, I feel that I'm worshiping Him the
Yeah.
most. I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
so much joy on the inside of me, and this is what do you call this, like confession, but I think you are the same. I buy the best tools with my
Oh
with
my goodness. The most that I can afford. Yeah. And I get into
yes,
trouble for it.
yes, that one. And
Yeah.
that what do you call this,
We
I
call it investments, right? We
yes.
invest in the right tools.
And then, like, I would do something, and then I would try to perfect it until
Yeah.
such time when I'm satisfied, like this is something that I really, but it's just a hobby. Okay, I
Yeah.
should not
Yeah.
use just,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm
It's
talking about.
Yeah, totally, totally. No, but you know what? We all, I think, we all need to find a hobby as a form of release, and also sometimes when we're doing that hobby, that's when our creative juices really flow. For me, when I need to come up with an idea, when I'm stuck, it's not about sitting in front of my PC, writing an email, writing a memo, writing whatever. To me, I need to get away. Sheila, believe it or not, the times my wife says this, what are you doing? You should be studying right now. When I need to study for something, be it a report, whatever, believe it or not, the way I do it is I cannot sit and just do that. Like I cannot sit in front of the PC and just, that's the only thing I do. My wife will say, "Why are you constantly walking around? Why are you playing, dribbling a ball? Why are you swinging a a golf club?" Why? That's when I get to think, is when I'm
Yeah.
indirectly thinking, but I'm doing something else. Again, that might be just me, but find something that gets your creative juices.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's very. I think everyone should have a hobby. In fact,
I think so. Yes,
I think
because
so.
our
Yeah.
minds are prone to thinking negatively unless it has been trained to think positively. We
Yeah.
have this default that we're always paying attention to the negative things. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there's the thing about training your mind into thinking positively. But creating something, getting a hobby actually helps. So,
Very.
the call to action. I want you to I don't know if you are promoting something or if you just want to give like uh, a takeaway or an advice to a lot of people. Like they could take away one thing with the talk that we had about leadership. What is it that you want to share?
I think I was listening to something yesterday as I was just constantly feeding my mind and my spirit as well. And I think the one thing that I want to share, I'll share what's in my heart that I think is very useful to people. And I share it because uh, it it hit home for me. This lesson sort of hit home for me. I knew it in my heart, but sometimes you gotta hear it again. And I share it not because I'm a master at it, but because I need to constantly work at it. But for everyone, I guess if there's one thing I'd like for people to take away, it's this. It's to understand that you carry a unique intrinsic value in this world,
Mm-hmm.
and that everyone around you does the same thing. Everyone has a unique intrinsic value that they bring. No one is ever useless. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you look at social media now, it's such a polarizing world. There's
Yes.
so much division.
Mm,
either in politics or even in spiritual matters. And sometimes we have to realize that no one has the monopoly or the exclusivity of being right. You and I
mm,
can feel passionate about something, but that doesn't make us right. And sometimes the best thing we can do is to listen to the people we have disagreements with,
mm,
to listen to people who don't see things the way you and I see things, and to understand that we need each other to add value to one another. And the way the Lord designed us is we talked about strengths and gifts and talents. And one thing I said was strengths and talents develop within the context of relationship, within the
mm,
context of people. And so we need to understand that we need each other and the diversity of each other and the diversity and the differences of thoughts. Now, if we can find a way to learn to be positive within the interactions that we have and add positivity to one another, even the ones that we disagree with,
mm,
then the world will be a better place. The world we live in will be a better place. The environment we operate in will be a better place. As a
mm,
leader, I never sought to be a leader. Uh, as a leader, the thing that I've always wanted to do was to develop people, to help people. And maybe that came innately because my dad was a pastor and a minister. And so I saw that and I said, I want to help people. I want to develop people into their full potential. Lo and behold, that was, I didn't know that was called leadership. Uh,
yeah,
with helping people, influencing them, developing them, you develop, you influence and you lead, right? But we need to understand you need to see people for their strengths. You need to
mm,
see people for the value they bring to a situation. We need to
mm,
stop looking at weaknesses of people or what they do wrong. Stop
wow.
that. We need to look at people and say, what do they do right? What are
Mm,
their strengths? What do they add in this relationship? And as a leader, it's our job to put together the elements of a team, right? And
mm,
when you look at that, you look at it and say, how can I capitalize on the strengths of my team members? At home, it's the same thing. How do I capitalize on the strength of my son and the strength of my daughter and the strength of my eldest and the strength of my middle child and the strength of my youngest? Never compare. Never compare.
wow.
Comparing is one of the fastest ways to kill something special, and everything is special.
Wow.
And so when you compare, you're killing the special of that difference.
Mm,
Understand, respect the difference, learn to live with that difference and say we are different. That's perfectly okay. In fact, not only is it okay, it is welcome, it is wanted in this relationship. And so you take that and you ask yourself, how can we learn to see people for their strengths, not their weaknesses? And how can we learn to encourage people to operate within that strength, and so that we can contribute to the bigger picture and we can all make a very positive influence and impact to the world around us.
mm, wow. Wow. You are a brilliant speaker, Carlo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Um, yes. So thank you everybody for watching, and thank you for those who's going to be watching on the replay. This has been Wisdom Talks with Sheila Zoe and Carlo Mata. You are phenomenal. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you